Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. In today's video, I'm going to take a look at this month in Dragalia Lost for the month of April. I'm also going to do some catching up because since the Dragalia Digest that came out for the 1.5 year anniversary, I really have not been keeping up with the news as closely as I would have liked. I need to read about Gala Alex, figure out what she's all about. Obviously, her banner is over. I also want to check out the 2 Scars of the Syndicate banners because just today, the preview came out for part 2. So we're going to be a little more comprehensive than we normally are with our This Month in Dragalia Lost as we play some catch-up. I have been playing the raid event for Scars of the Syndicate, but honestly, I don't have a lot to remark on with this event. The music is very cool. I mean, that's a nice feature, but as we'll see in This Month in Dragalia Lost, unfortunately, it's hard to hear the music, and they gave a tip for what to do about that. But honestly, even though Mega Fight in co-op lasted about 30 seconds, yeah, all of these fights just go too quickly to where you can't really enjoy the battle very much. So I have no idea what the mechanics of the boss are. I have no idea how Aldred works because I put him on my team, but the battle just ends so quickly. So I don't really know what the best solution to that is, because on one hand, you know, as a phone game, you want these battles to go quickly. You don't want the boss to just be an HP sponge for no reason, but the shadow element is so stacked right now that that fight is over in a flash. Anyway, we're going to spend most of our time here, though, as there's lots of news posts that we need to go through. I had previously thought I would be making a video about the Gala Alex banner, and I did my free summons for her. I won't spoil any of that because I recorded everything, all my summoning for her, but I didn't really get to talk about her as a unit, so I figure we'll do that in this video. We'll talk about the mana spirals. I mean, we're going to start, let's see how far back we have to go, with the 1.5 year anniversary stuff, and just kind of flip through the headlines, and if there's one where there's more detail we need to go into, I'll click into it, but otherwise we'll kind of save most of the discussion for This Month in Dragalia Lost. Obviously, there are a lot of headlines here. So, we had Dragon Special and Paragons of Piety leading up to Gala. We got our digest. We got a version update. This had a lot more details than were in the digest. When I posted that video, it was just my raw reaction. So, you know, there are a couple things that panned out differently once we had all the details. For example, Gala Alex, her entire kit wasn't really revealed in the video because her skill descriptions are so long that they didn't fit in the video. So we're going to get into that. But for the version update, you can see your summon history. Let's see what else is here. Obviously, event compendium that released. I finished all the 3 events in the compendium, starting with the Wish to the Winds because that had new facility levels. It went by fairly quickly. I wouldn't suggest rushing it necessarily because right now with our double stamina recovery, it is nice to have a relevant stamina sink to throw all your stamina into, and any of these 3 events are a good cause for that. I was surprised with how many of the rewards were reset and available within the events. That was pretty cool. I honestly thought that if we had already cleared it in the most previous or most recent rerun of it, that we weren't going to get additional rewards, or if they were going to be kind of generic or lower quality rewards. But you still had things in here like the Damascus Crystals, Augments, Champion's Testaments, and a lot of Eldwater and Consecrated Water, which was nice as we got a lot of new worm prints come out pretty recently. Chain co-abilities are here. Obviously, we know a lot more about this now than in the digest video, and frankly, I'm very mixed on chain co-abilities. There are some cool synergies. I had a lot of fun the first 5 days or so just reading about every character's chain co-abilities, but I think the amount of complexity it adds to the game may not be worth the amount of extra power when there were so many other direct ways to increase the power. Things like weapon and dragon augments, very simple system. It's something that we are very familiar with already because it exists for worm prints and adventurers. And obviously we have the 10 HP dragon augments and weapon augments that are available through the normal endeavors. So I just feel like this is such a roundabout way to improve power, and it introduces a whole extra step of memorization on what each character can do. On the other hand, from a revenue standpoint, I totally see why they would make a change like this, because it means that characters who you may not have been interested in otherwise might have an extremely important function as a backliner to provide their co-ability or chain co-ability to your main unit in co-op situations. So I'm kind of saddened in some ways by this chain co-ability change. I don't know. It's fun to theory craft. On the other hand, it's more power creep that we really didn't necessarily need. And I don't think it's as straightforward to where it would make content easier for folks, because it involves like learning a whole new system. That said, I do think they're pretty balanced, the chain co-abilities for the most part. Like, if you have an offensive co-ability, you're probably going to have a defensive or neutral-ish co-ability, like something like Dragon Haste, which isn't directly strength or skill damage or whatnot, but for certain characters that can be very powerful. It seems like some of the big winners out of this are Dragon's Claws, Dragon's Haste when paired with an offensive co-ability. Combo Time seems like one that they're willing to throw on blades or daggers as well, so those all seem pretty good. And then there's also a hits equals strength. I believe it's like 10 hits equals strength. That's a pretty good amount of strength you can get, like 13%, paired with a Dragon Haste or other kind of middle-of-the-road co-ability, not necessarily defensive one, but middle-of-the-road one. And the other big thing that this does is it makes it easier to pass HP checks with ranged characters, because you are in total control of what co-abilities you're bringing to the fight to allow your units to survive. You're not reliant on matching up with the right type of weapon in co-op. So good and bad. I think mostly good, but it does raise the power ceiling a lot higher in a time when I don't think a lot of us needed that much more power. And I don't think it's exactly beginner friendly or easy to comprehend. So chain co-abilities exist now. We're going to have to get used to that. It's nothing to do with the skill chain mechanic on Gala Alex, which is kind of how I first read that as in the Dragalia Digest reaction. There's some tips. It's explained how to upgrade them. They upgrade along with regular co-abilities. The new Fafnir medal item is out. I've been collecting those. You can get up to 50 a week, and you want to make sure you're getting them. It doesn't look like the treasure trade resets for that, at least not now. So as things stand, there are 10 Champions Testaments in there. That should probably be your highest priority item, because those cost 50 to trade for, meaning an entire week's worth of Fafnir medals. So you're looking at 10 weeks to cash out those from the shop. We did get a gift of 100 Fafnir medals as well, so that speeds you up by a couple weeks there, but frankly, none of the other materials, as good as they are probably as precious as getting those Champions Testaments, especially as we prepare for more mana spirals, potentially needing to power up more characters in terms of their chain co-ability. Although I will say, for 4-star characters and below, you don't technically need to use Champions Testaments to max out their chain co-ability. Once you promote them to a 5-star, you don't have to use that Damascus crystal node. You could get them up to 49 nodes and still provide the max amount of chain co-ability, or even 44 nodes if that's what you wanted to. So it's really just for 5 stars that you would need to worry about that for unlocking the final ring of their mana circle. Well, that's Fafnir medals, resetting the social reward for co-op. This I kind of breezed through pretty quickly, but obviously Wurmai is always nice to have. You'll be able to check your summon history. We already talked about that. Other changes, the normal endeavors, where they added some normal endeavors where you can get skip tickets. They changed the content of standard daily endeavors. You no longer have to run the avenues every day. It's just about doing quests, essentially. Made it so the smithy level requirement for collecting 3-star core weapons is removed. So this is about expediting the newer player experience for the most part. An explanation called skills that target multiple enemies will be added under the battle section under help. They're adjusting the UI on some screens. And then this is, I think, the final part that is very relevant here is the balance adjustments. So for Advanced Dragon Trials, the amounts of drops are no longer randomized and are a set quantity. At first, I thought this only applied to the weekly bonuses. It actually applies to all your clears of Advanced Dragon Trials, which is super nice. I thought I was getting lucky for a while with getting, 3 tails per run expert, as that was the high side of variance in terms of what it was like before. As it turns out, I think they've just adjusted it so you always get that amount minimum. Every time you always get that amount. There's no variance anymore, which is super nice. It means that it's going to be faster to craft High Dragon Trial weapons, Tier 1, and then eventually Tier 2. And in terms of horns, they also made it so that you get those as part of your weekly bonus for clearing Expert difficulty, which is awesome. That provides a very natural gateway from Expert to Master, I think. And you only get 2 per weekly bonus, so still, that's 6 per week. So in 5 weeks, if all else fails, you could be going from fighting Expert trials to Master trials via a Tier 2 High Dragon weapon, which is pretty great. So I think that that's a really positive change and reduces a lot of the nuisance of grinding out the High Dragon weapons. Obviously, if we could get back compensation for how much stamina and wings and whatnot we've already spent on these, that would be very lovely, but that's not happening. So that's just a pipe dream. Other than that, they did some interesting changes on 3-star weapons. They added poison. They've added poison in the past, but burn and paralysis on weapons at 3-star, which is kind of weird because it doesn't always match up with the element of the weapon. And they're making it so that these are the types of weapons that drop from some of the easier quests now, as opposed to 2-star weapons and worm prints, which were kind of irrelevant. And then they fixed some issues. And yeah, I think let's move on because we still have a lot to discuss. So this version update happened. What else happened? All right. I think another version update is coming up, which is kind of crazy how long we've been out of this, but some of these things will be faster than others to discuss. So talks about the big version update. Gala Dragalia is a big one. There were these 2 platinum showcases that happened. They split the past Gala characters. Maybe they're going to continue this going forward, for the anniversary. They might do this. We had our daily free 10-fold summon event on the Gala. So you got 60 free summons for that. And let's see. There's a lot. All right, so instead of viewing the announcing Gala Dragalia, we'll just view the one when it releases. Some new worm prints, limited time Champions Road campaign endeavors. These endeavors were pretty cool. This was a way of pathing players toward taking on standard High Midgard Stormer's Trial and standard Volk's Wrath. Actually really thoughtful design, I feel like, because each of the quests is about building up power toward that specific purpose. And I'm pretty sure in this article, they even show some examples of the types of builds or teams that you would want to use. Yeah, there's a whole explanation here about how to boost might, tricks for overcoming challenging quests, recommended team compositions, and this is something we hadn't really seen before from the dev side. We've seen a few tips in the info page on boss fights, but having an actual strategy guide of sorts is really cool. I've already finished the campaign endeavors for Champions Road, but these are around for a while until March 27th, so if you haven't, this is another good activity to be doing with your stamina this month. So we have that. And we have Event Compendium. So I already talked about Event Compendium, having gone through some of the events. One of the things that I was sort of surprised by was that this month it was announced that we're going to have the Hunt for Harmony revived, but not necessarily announced that it would be added to the Event Compendium. In my mind, the Event Compendium would mean that going forward, every revival just gets stuck in the compendium and is there forever afterward. So I don't know if new events or event revivals will be treated that way or not. Maybe they'll do it where for the month of April, they're going to revive the Hunt for Harmony, which was our Easter event. And perhaps on May 1st, they'll announce, in case you missed it, now the Hunt for Harmony is in the compendium. And that would also be a second opportunity to collect rewards again if you didn't miss it. Maybe they'll do it like that. So we have our anniversary celebration. That's filled with things like the packs, the platinum showcases, the double stamina recovery, triple drops, etc. They announced basically once these were live, the platinum showcases, the daily free tenfold summons, and Gala. I don't want to miss the worm prints here, but yeah, let's go ahead and look at this. There's just so much to talk about. So the Red Impulse worm print, another source of Dragon's Claws, which is kind of nice, other than an Ancient Oath and the Shining Overlord. Obviously, Dragon's Claw strategies have a lot more play with the Chain Co ability change, because it's another source of strength buffs from transformation that you can get. That being said, the Chain Co ability Dragon's Claws effect is smaller in magnitude than the effect on Adventurers and on Wormprints. However, it doesn't compete with the Wormprint maximum, but one thing to note is that for any type of buff in Dragalia Lost, there's a max of 10 of that buff icon that you can have. So you do want to be careful about overstacking Dragon's Claws in that sense, because from your Wormprint, you're getting 3 strength buffs each time you shapeshift. You're going to get up to a total of 3. You're getting 1 per shapeshift. That's already 3 icons. If your character has Dragon's Claws built in, like let's say you're running Yuden or Zanefried or Dragon Yule Zanefried, that's another 3 icons. You're already sitting at 6 strength buffs. Perhaps your weapon, if you're running Yuden, is an Agito weapon. That's a 7th strength buff. And then maybe you want to have some flexibility for things like Popstar Siren buffs or any other types of in-combat buffs that you might receive from your teammates. You're going to easily hit that 10 cap. So it is a small consideration. You could run 1 Dragon's Claws Chain Co ability still and have that room and just go up to 10 and be prepared to not receive any other types of buffs in combat. And obviously you don't shapeshift all at once, so, you know, for large portions of the fight, you're still going to have some slack toward that cap of 10, but toward the end of the fight, once you've already shapeshifted 3 times, you're not going to have much slack after that. So that is an interesting consideration with this. Dragon's skill is new. This increases attack skill damage. I'm honestly not sure how good this is, but I think at the least this doesn't cap with your skill damage on your characters. I could see this Wormprint being really good if there was a dagger centered around Dragon Transformation, because daggers already have the Twinfold Bond Wormprint, which covers their skill damage, maxes it out. It gives them 15 out of 20 on their strength cap from Wormprints. At that point, you've covered the most important categories, and you can kind of afford to run another secondary Wormprint like this that gives you even more skill damage and even more strength in the form of visible buffs. So if there's ever a character like that, I could see this being powerful. Memories of Youth. This is good. I think this is kind of for the event compendium. Striker's Strength increases your strength for the amount of enemies that you defeat with 4 strikes. Up to 5 times per quest, you can get plus 30% strength in visible buffs off of this, which is pretty good. And also gives you shapeshift prep of 10%, so that's also quite good in facility events. Honestly, it's really easy to use dragons to clear out entire waves of enemies, and Striker's Strength is good to feed on the weaker enemies early on. So if you are having trouble and aren't just auto-battling through some of the compendium content, Memories of Youth actually stands out. You know, it's, if you're newer to the game, you have to decide which Wormprints to invest in. This covers 2 kind of important things. Like, Shapeshift Prep is a nice one to have. Striker's Strength, it's a nice thing to have for wave-based content. And I could see this getting some play in the Fire Emblem Heroes Revival event, because that's an event where dragons and Striker's Strength would both play pretty well. You know, dragons were good at bottlenecking enemy waves when you got overwhelmed, and Striker's Strength is just good in that. Some characters, like some weapon types, it is harder to land and accumulate Striker's Strength. For things like, you know, swords, axes, daggers, even lances and blades, I feel like it's pretty easy to aim and power up with your 4-strike. If you're a wand, I don't know, you know, your roll FS, roll 4-strike can work, but you have to actually land the kill with the Force Strike, which is a little bit clumsier in my opinion. Same with bows, although bows tend to do roll Force Strike, but that's a lot easier to hit on one target than on multiple. And to some extent, same with staves or staves, but I don't know that you'd necessarily want to use this on them anyway. Then they made it so these worm prints are no longer limited. Spirit of the Season, that's a pretty huge one. Only source of Paralyzed Punisher right now. Wish Upon the Yule Tree, good for wave-based content, facility events, healing. It's a defensive print. Prince of Dragalia, actually pretty relevant. It's basically best in slot for water daggers along with Twinfold Bonds as a general print. You know, if they don't have some other type of speciality, this is going to give them both critical damage and a good amount of critical rate as long as they can maintain combo. Glittering Dragalia, not really relevant. Saintly Delivery, not really relevant. And Roast Feast, not really relevant. So there's an overview on those worm prints, the new ones and the ones that got revived. I don't think those are the only worm prints we're going to talk about today. Let's see, where are we now? We've gone through so much already. I think we have already covered all of this. We've effectively talked enough about the Platinum showcases. Just remember, those are random. You know, they're still available right now, but you're not guaranteed. You don't get to pick the character you want. It is random among the ones that are on focus. There was an Astral Raid for Volfar that I forgot about. When I made my digest reaction, I forgot that the new raid wouldn't have started. A gift to celebrate the 1.5 year anniversary. We'll get to that, but let's finally get into Gala Alex. So Gala Alex, a lot of people were hyped about this character. I've heard that she is very broken. I can confirm that I haven't used her myself. I'm not going to say whether or not I pulled her in my summoning, as we'll get into that. I have that recorded, so I want to share that and wait. But I haven't used her. I can at least say that much. So I don't really know a lot about this character. I just know there's a lot of text, and apparently she's just really good at spamming skills. So with the new outfit, Alex has become Elisand's personal guard. The white hood represents her leaving the assassin's life, and she swears a vow upon her blade to safeguard her friend and never lose heart no matter what. Her skills are Crisis Edge, which spans more than a page. Umbral Erasure, likewise, spans more than a page. And her co-ability is Dragon Haste. Chain co-ability is Poison equals user strength. Abilities are Reduced Defense Punisher 30%, Poison Punisher 30%, and Guardian Shadow 2, which gives her 100% immunity to blindness and paralysis. Alright. So then they have this whole other thing below. This is finally going to happen. I'm going to have to finally read through this to understand how this character works. I just know that she's busted. I don't know how she works. Let's read it. Crisis Edge deals shadow damage to the target and reduces their defense by 5% for 15 seconds. This defense reduction will not stack. After using this skill, for a set period of time, it will be possible to trigger a skill chain. Using Crisis Edge during this window will make it deal shadow damage to enemies directly ahead and deal bonus damage afterward, and in both cases, damage is increased against foes with reduced defense. Okay, so this much was clear from the trailer video, the digest video. Furthermore, if the target meets one of the following conditions when using Umbral Erasure, this will also result in a skill chain. What? Umbral Erasure is her second skill. Oh man, so this now depends on her second skill. Altering the effects of Crisis Edge if it is used during the skill chain window. In this case, it will deal shadow damage to the target along with the following bonus effects depending on which condition is met. If the target has a buff, this skill will dispel one buff from them and deal bonus damage afterward. This bonus damage will be increased if the foe's defense is reduced. So this also has Dispel, apparently. If the target is in the break state, this skill will deal extra damage to them. It will also deal bonus damage afterwards. This bonus damage will also be increased by the enemy being in break state. Okay, that seems redundant, but it probably isn't. It's probably like a second modifier increase or something. If an enemy meets both of the above conditions, condition 1 will be prioritized. So if they're broken and have a buff, they're going to get debuffed. If they're just broken, they're just going to take extra damage. And both of these effects only happen if one of those conditions is met when you use your second skill. Then you're going to get a skill chain, which changes the effects of your first skill, I think. Let's keep reading for Umbrella Erasure. Deals shatter damage to the target and inflicts poison. After using this skill for a set period of time, it will be possible to trigger a skill chain. Does the first skill say that? Yeah. Alright. Using Umbrella Erasure during this window will make it deal shatter damage to the target and deal bonus damage afterwards, and in both cases, damage is increased against poison foes. Okay. Furthermore, if the target meets one of the following conditions when using Crisis Edge, now this is her first skill, this will also result in a skill chain, altering the effects of Umbrella Erasure if it is used during the skill chain window. In this case, it will deal shadow damage to the target, along with the following bonus effects depending on which condition is met. If the target has a buff, this will dispel one buff from them and deal bonus damage afterwards. The bonus damage is increased if the foe is poisoned. If the target is in the break state, this skill will deal extra damage to them. It will also deal bonus damage afterwards. The bonus damage will also be increased by the enemy being in break state. If an enemy meets both of the above conditions, condition 1 will be prioritized. So that second part looks very parallel on both of them. The difference being Crisis Edge cares about reduced defense and Umbrella Erasure cares about poison. But the fact that they reference one another is very confusing. I mean, skill chain sounds very confusing. I've heard in practice you kind of just spam. So let's now look at the special adventure characteristics. Instead of skill gauges, Gala Alex features a new functionality called the Skill Reservoir, which is consumed when she uses skills. Note, this does not apply to weapon skills. The skill reservoir fills as you hit enemies with attacks, and it is possible to fill it up enough to unleash skills up to 3 times. Each of Alex's Crisis Edge and Umbrella Erasure skills decreases the skill reservoir by 1 level, and hitting enemies with skills consecutively activates Skill Chain. When Skill Chain activates, enemies will suffer additional effects and damage based on the skill combination and the state of the enemy. So where can we see her skill reservoir? I don't even see it on the picture. This is her shapeshift gauge. Is this number 1 her skill reservoir? I guess. If skill chain can be used, the frame around the skill icon will grow blue. Skill chain example using Crisis Edge. First use. The Crisis Edge skill is used. The target takes shatter damage and enemy defense is decreased. Second use. The following skill chains may occur depending on the state of the enemy and the skill that is used. A. The Crisis Edge skill is used and skill chain activates. Enemies directly ahead take shadow damage. Enemies with decreased defense take extra damage. The skill deals bonus damage. Enemies with decreased defense take extra damage. B. The Umbrella Erasure skill is used when the target is under the effects of a buff, condition 1, and skill chain activates. The target takes shadow damage and 1 buff effect ends. The skill deals bonus damage. Enemies afflicted with poison take extra damage. C. The Umbrella Erasure skill is used while the target is in the break state, condition 2, and skill chain activates. The target takes shadow damage. Enemies in the break state take extra damage. The skill deals bonus damage. Enemies in the break state. Okay. Skill chain example using Umbrella Erasure. Oh man. Alright, I think I understand how this works, but it feels very, very confusing, the way that this is laid out. Basically, I think the way that this works is, and the people out there who have played with Gala Alex can correct me. I'm sure you already know by this point. This is probably somewhat old news. But basically, I think you can get a reservoir of up to 3 skills in a row. Your skills don't charge by skill gauges. You have a reservoir, so this can go up to number 3. When your reservoir is full, that might be the best time to start comboing off, I guess, because you can chain skills, and by using them in succession, you increase the effectiveness of the skill that follows. Maybe it's good enough to just, use these as your reservoir depletes. I'm not sure how long the chain lasts. If you can just, wait till you charge your next skill and it still counts as part of the chain. But essentially, like, if you use the first skill, now you've started a chain, and using the first or second skill afterward, you're going to get some of those bonus effects where it talks about it'll result in a skill chain. If the target meets one of the following conditions when using Crisis Edge, this will result in a skill chain, altering the effects of Umbrella Erasure if it is used during the skill chain window. I guess it doesn't say how long the skill chain window is on here. That would be nice to know. But I'm sure that's probably data mined, so that's probably known somewhere. But essentially what I've heard is you just need... Gala Alex has like a unique combo or very fast combo. For a sword, her jump is not very penalizing, and she can charge and use her first skill after like one of her one combo essentially. So I think that she's very powerful. You kind of just spam her skills, and probably there's a good way to do it in terms of sequence. She has a really good chain co ability. I mean, she's just a really strong high personal DPS unit, like the strongest in the game right now. I'm not gonna lie, like, I really hate how these adventure characteristics are just like written as a blog post. I really didn't like this about Valerio and Mitsuba. I feel personally like if you're going to have special characteristics in your character, like say Lathna has a special transformation, or Halloween Mim or Gala Mim, they have special transformations. Well, they have abilities. You know, they have text on the character abilities that explain how this works. Nothing about this character, if I have this in my collection and I just go to their page and read it, nothing here says anything about skill reservoir. And maybe it's pedantic, but I find that kind of upsetting. It's like, you know, these characters are just pulling this out of nowhere. You know, this is not explained anywhere. This is not a cost to them. It's not taking an ability slot. They just have like random auxiliary mechanics for no reason, it feels like. Obviously there's a reason, which is this is a Gala character and they're trying to push it. But think about Gala Ronzel. Gala Ronzel has these gauge mechanics, but his first ability slot is dedicated to the gauge mechanics. It says gives the user 2 gauges. So they've really gotten into this weird territory of design. I kind of feel like, I guess I'm somebody who cares about design space, so I think about exhausting the possibilities with your existing elements before going into this weird territory. But like, to me, there's so many other stones unturned that are just much simpler and still appealing. I don't know about this. Like, this doesn't appeal to me a lot. So as a preview of my summoning session, this is one of the reasons I was not that interested in Gala Alex. But of course, I don't want to spoil what happened, so... Okay, we've talked about Gala Alex as much as I think I'm able to. We've talked a lot, and we haven't even gotten to this month in Dragalia Lost properly. I'm definitely going to have to include a timestamp, because this is just absurd, the amount of information we have to cover today. A gift to celebrate the 1.5 year anniversary, 2 Champions Testaments. Pretty nice gift. Let's see. What else do we have? We're getting to the most recent event, limited time packs. For these limited time packs, the Sunlight Stone one's actually a really good deal. If you're willing to spend that much money, you're getting twice the amount of Sunlight Stones you normally would for that price, and some extra Diamantium, because in the monthly packs it costs $40 for 1 Sunlight Stone plus I think 2,000 Diamantium. So this is actually a very good deal. It's just expensive. Diamantium Mega Pack, I'm not about it. I don't like it. You don't get anything guaranteed unless you're using this Diamantium for like refreshes on your stamina or something. In that case, at least you know what you're getting. But if you're just doing this to summon randomly, I'm not about it. Dragon Upgrade Special, pretty solid pack. You know, Sunlight Stone. It's basically a little bit more Diamantium than the monthly Sunlight Stone pack. Plus you get a 5-star summon voucher, which at the least is some Eldwater, and at best is a useful unbind on a dragon that you have. Limited time 5-star dragon pack. This one, it's a bit Like, if you're really gung-ho about doing one of the platinums, maybe one of the platinums has a very high value to you because you don't have any of the Gala characters on it, then this is a relatively cheaper way to get that amount of diamantium if you've exhausted a lot of the limited packs that are available one time only in the shop. You do get a 5-star summon voucher for a dragon, which is better than a summon voucher for an adventurer. So, you know, this is okay, but I'm not really that excited about that one. And then the superior orb pack, it's easy to overlook this one, but this might be the best one to get if you just want to pull on a platinum, because it has 4 Champions Testaments. At first I saw these orbs and thought, you know, those are good for mana spirals, but that's all things that you can kind of grind up over time by playing void battles. But the fact that you're getting 4 Champions Testaments for that price with the diamantium, and I think this one's $25 as well, is pretty good. So there's some reasonable packs here for those who do want to spend money on the game. Let's see. We have the packs. We've now discussed those. We have Mana Spiral to more adventurers. Okay, let's get into it. All of these Mana Spirals were somewhat disappointing to me other than Eric, but then it turned out that they're also just really powerful and really pushed as far as the modifiers on their damage. So on paper, I was kind of disappointed when I saw these Mana Spirals. I was like, you know, this isn't cool. This really isn't what we signed up for with Mana Spirals. You know, a lot of the initial Mana Spirals got me so hyped because of the uniquely named effects that characters were getting. Yuden had the new ability Dragon's Dominance. Even Naveed had a newly named ability. Ezalith obviously got Flash of Genius as an ability. It's just a cosmetic touch. You know, it's not actually relevant what an ability is named, but it made the characters feel special. And that's something that I really appreciated early on with the Mana Spirals. Obviously, at the same time, you saw the tack that they took with 3 stars. Just slap burn onto everything, even if it's not really connected to the character. So you have to think with these 3-star characters, that's probably what's going to happen. I was pleasantly surprised with Eric, but disappointed at the same time because these were announced back at the beginning of January. That's how long ago they were announced, and they've been delayed to basically the beginning of April for only 3-star shadow characters. So you would think that that amount of delay warrants something a little bit special and a little bit extra with these characters. There's really not much here, honestly. So they're very good. Vice is probably the best here. I think Vice just slots in really easily. He's a very effective AI if you're doing solos. But anyway, we'll talk about them. Unfortunately, this is kind of the world that we live in now, where characters who have no connection to poison do extra damage to poison foes, or in Vice's case, his next 4-strike can also inflict poison on his lethal edge. I will say with Vice, this actually does kind of make sense. Vice is trying to learn how to cook in order to poison foes. He's out of work as an assassin. He's trying to make poison food. Like, there is a relevant connection here. But frankly, I'm just waiting for Chef Vice as an ult. That would be pretty sweet. Same co-ability. Not that relevant of a chain co-ability. Broken Punisher of 35% is pretty big. That's going to lead to a lot of burst damage. And then Blindness Res, which is okay. I mean, Paralysis Res is kind of the norm, or a little bit better, I would say, right now. But Vice is pretty good just because his skills do so much damage. I think you're going to want another primary poison enabler to enable the killer effect on his 2 skills, because getting poison only on the 4-strike on the 2nd skill is going to be a little bit too slow to keep up poison. So you probably want another poison enabler, but Vice just does so much damage with a good critical rate co-ability. And his first skill, Fatal Blow, charges very, very fast. It has a very low SP cost, so Vice ended up being strong. Maybe the most relevant use of poison here. Eric, also doing extra damage to poison foes. You know what they say about Eric. He hates those poisoned enemies. Just wants to do extra damage to them. I say that sarcastically. Curran, you know, why did they do this to our boys, Curran and Eric? I mean, yeah, it's great. More damage is great. The Affliction design space feels like we're just getting pigeonholed into this, though, with the killer mechanic. I mean, I would like to see other types of designs. It's funny how we were lamenting how bad Afflictions were for a long time, and now the dot isn't bad, but also just the fact that they enable killer bonus and punisher bonus is so strong. Wild Strike, lo and behold, extra damage to poison foes. Defense co-ability, actually pretty relevant chain co-ability. Poison equals user strength plus 8%. This is on Gala Alex. It's a higher percent on her. It's also on Heinwald. Probably best on Gala Alex if you don't need defenses or healing, because the Dragon Haste basic co-ability that she provides is slightly better in terms of DPS output, I suppose, if you're going to shapeshift, than defense or recovery potency that Heinwald have. And obviously her 13% on her CCA chain co-ability is better than Eric's, but still, at least this feels cohesive with Eric wanting to have a teammate that causes poison because of his first two effects. So abilities. Wild Noble increases 4 strike damage by 30%. This is the coolest named ability on this update, and grants him a Dispel on his next 4 strike. It's nice to have another Dispel option. Obviously, we'll see on the most recent banner they've expanded this even further, but honestly, just having only Cleo and Nefaria for a long time made most team comps very, very consistent, led Kayan to be a bit stagnant. This allows people to meme around and do something fun with Eric if they're an Eric fan, and I appreciate that, or if they're just a 3-star fan who wants to try a new unit. These are also some of our most effective blindness res characters at this point. And then for Althemia, Endless Nightmare, so she actually can inflict poison. Poison foes take extra damage on her second skill. Skill damage co-ability is great. Chain co-ability, not that great, but kind of relevant. It's kind of crazy that this only goes up to 3%, even when max upgraded. I mean, is that right? Is that max upgraded? 3%? Really? You have 4 co-ability upgrades. You know, what does it start at? Does it start at -1? That seems weird, but whatever. I guess that is what it is. It's kind of okay for her because she's ranged. Full HP equals skill damage 45%. They didn't remove the full HP condition. It is a lot of skill damage, but I think in terms of ease of use, not having a full HP condition would have made her a lot easier to use. If you're skilled enough or in content where you can easily keep her at full HP, it's good. She has good damage output. She's basically a poison enabler and poison DPS all in one. Good co-ability of skill damage. So solid character, but again, Althemia, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think Althemia has anything to do with poisoning people. So kind of sad. Mana Spirals, from a flavor perspective, they're very powerful, but from a flavor standpoint, I don't know about those. So we've covered the Mana Spirals. What's next on our list here? We've covered Mana Spirals, a gift before, so many gifts. We got Amplified Crystals and Blessed ETH on Ashes. Alright, I hope that you enjoyed those. What else is next? The new raid event. I've said my piece on the new raid event. Maybe we can look at Aldred in a moment. Regarding an issue with the amount of rupees required to craft certain void weapons, rupees were refunded if you've crafted those. Regarding changes to Allied A adventurers in Kayan's Wrath, we've adjusted the behavior of Allied A adventurers. Okay, they'll no longer move outside the battleground area when Kayan uses every man for themselves. Interesting to note. More new worm prints. So these worm prints are tied to the Scars of the Syndicate raid event. The Synthetic Dragon, Resilient Offense, that's our second source on worm prints after Dear Diary, which is a bow specific print in that it has critical rate for bows of plus 14%. This has last recovery 4, so better if you're not a bow and you want Resilient Offense. Like, Mega Man is a character who comes to mind where he doesn't have a lot of options because skill damage doesn't affect him. So people run him with Resilient Offense and try to proc it. Probably better to use the Synthetic Dragon since he's a wand unit and not a bow unit. This is actually kind of an interesting combination. I could see there being potential on characters like Cassandra who want to be countering and maybe heal up or repeatedly go to low HP. But the problem is that Wyrmprint slots are just so competitive that it's hard to sacrifice a Poison Punisher print or just a generic skill damage print for something like this right now. But still, I like the synergy. I like what they were thinking with this print. A Widow's Lament features our new character, Grace, who we'll talk about probably, hopefully in less than 45 minutes from now. Last defense plus 50% and healing double buff 3. Just can't see this really mattering much right now. Alright. Talked about the new Wyrmprints. The second of the new Wyrmprints. Alright, what's next? Version update. Update. They sent a free 10-fold summon voucher to people. Cool. I guess that's it. The raid event was live. Issue regarding Eldred's mana circles. Some of the mana circles required Abaddon orbs, the tier 4 shadow orbs, and people got refunded, I believe. Then it was the first of the month. They reset the treasure trades and the shop limits. Cool. Got to collect some more Champion's Testaments and other void materials, and a tiny amount of augments that's still tiny from the Astral Raids treasure trade. They announced Scars of the Syndicate Part 1 with the dreaded Part 1 text, of course. One day only. Vagabond Pupper was live, and I already talked about that at length. I decided I had to put this video off to talk about that, so I hope that you enjoyed his spotlight. That got an epilogue implying that Puppy will return in the future, which is pretty hype. And then we got Scars of the Syndicate Part 1 live. This month in Dragalia Lost, a gift of summon vouchers. Just 3. We just got 3 randomly, 3 summon vouchers. And our newly announced Scars of the Syndicate Part 2. So we're finally somewhat caught up here. I guess this is probably where I'll make a timestamp so that we can talk about all the new stuff with the 2 new banners and this month in Dragalia Lost. So let's start with Scars of the Syndicate Part 1. This banner features Belina, who's a new Shadow Dagger, and Andromeda, a Shadow Dragon. So Belina, I'll show that failure who's really the strongest. Very cute design here. I know this is going to appeal to a lot of people. If not for Fire Emblem coming out so soon, this might be a consideration for me to try summon. I do like her a lot. A woman with a lust for combat who is given a dragon's power by the Shadowy Syndicate. She bears no hatred for the group, instead choosing to bask in her new abilities, even if they do occasionally run berserk. So her skills are Renegade Descent, deals shadow damage to the target and nearby enemies. Damage will be increased as the user's HP decreases. Pretty cool, so she is kind of got that crisis effect. If this skill is used during Dragon Drive, a variant called Renegade Dragon Fall will be used instead. Renegade Dragon Fall deals shadow damage to multiple targets and enemies near those targets and dispels 1 buff from each, so bringing in Dispel, pretty cool. Damage will be increased as the user's HP decreases, so that part is the same. Using this skill will consume 25% of the user's Dragon Drive gauge, but fills 100% of the skill's skill gauge after use. So I suppose that Renegade Dragonfall is going to bring you out of Dragon Drive rapidly, but you can kind of spam it based on that last part of text there, that it fills the skill immediately. Renegade Gambit fills 40% of the user's Dragon Drive gauge if the user's HP is above 30% of max HP, reduces their HP to 30% of max HP, and fills the Dragon Drive gauge relative to the amount of HP that was lost. That's pretty cool. So you can get 70% of your Dragon gauge filled immediately. If this skill is used during Dragon Drive, a variant called Renegade Shadow Blaze will be used instead. If the user's HP is above 30% of max HP, it will reduce their HP to 30% of max and deal shadow damage to enemies directly ahead. Damage will be increased as the user's HP decreases. Using Renegade Shadow Blaze will consume all of the user's Dragon Drive gauge. So you have to assume that that does a lot of damage, I guess, and maybe you want to use that at the last minute when you're going to run out of Dragon Drive. The Dragon Drive mechanic is still not very familiar to me because like I said, the raid ends so quickly that I don't have a lot of context for what Aldred is actually doing in the fight. Just watching him attack basically for 2 to 10 seconds each time. Critical rate co-ability typical of daggers. HP below 40% equals light res of 10%, so she fits into this crisis mold. Abilities Renegade Queen 2. Grants her a Dragon Drive gauge and changes the Shapeshift button into a Dragon Drive button. Pressing this button activates her Dragon Drive. During Dragon Drive, her standard attacks and force strikes will be changed. Damage will be increased as her HP decreases, and standard attacks and force strikes will fill her Dragon Drive gauge. So you can actually stay in Dragon Drive by just doing attacks. While Dragon Drive is active, the user's skill damage will be increased by 35% and defense will be increased by 75%. I like the defense increase here. We're going to get into this on the next banner preview, but a lot of low HP characters rely on shields to survive, like Valentine's Addis or Natalie, and having extra defense is pretty nice for that. She doesn't have any shields built into her kit, but we'll see a way that she can gain access to shields where having extra defense is pretty nice. She has blindness res, and HP below 30% equals strength and attack rate 3. Increases strength by 20% and attack rate by 10% when HP is 30% or below. So it's hard to evaluate a character like this without knowing what the Dragon Gauge feels like to play, I feel like. But a lot of units for a while now, their Dragon transformation isn't always that relevant. In the Shadow element, it's a little bit more relevant than most because Shinobi's Energize is pretty darn good, and maybe you're running Fatalis and your Shapeshift has implications like cursing you for the rest of the match unless you get blinded or something to reset it. So it's a little bit hard to evaluate how good this is, but on paper, trading Dragon access for more damage seems like a good trade. And then we have Andromeda. So Andromeda is also focused on low HP, a dragon captured by the Vile Syndicate. She shoulders the sins of all people and through offering herself up cleanses them of said sin, or so it is said. She lost her memory due to the Syndicate testing and now travels with Aldred. So she has Unblessed Bonds, deal shadow damage to the target and nearby enemies, and increases the entire team's defense by 30% for 15 seconds. Shadow Strength plus 40%, so you always are going to get 40% strength on her on Shadow units. HP below 30% equals strength and defense 2. If the user is attuned to Shadow, increases strength by 40% and defense by 100%. That is huge when HP is 30% or below. So if you are a low HP character, it's hard to deny this being the best dragon. Shinobi might actually be better. 90% skill damage might be better than 80% strength, depending on how reliant that character is on skill damage. But having the 100% defense at that low in HP, if you're relying on shields to keep you alive, that is going to make a huge difference in your survival. Now, we'll talk about this with Grace, but honestly, a lot of the fights where these characters would be at their best elementally, you don't really need to jump through all these hoops to easily clear those fights. So that's one downside, I think, to both of these banners, is that Shadow is so stacked as an element. And even though the Crisis low HP mechanics are cool, it does feel like extra hoops to jump through for content that can already be cleared fairly easily. So take that for what it's worth. If you love these characters and think that that mechanic and that style of play is super cool, awesome. Andromeda seems like an excellent dragon, but, this being a normal banner, these are going to be in the permanent summoning pool. You're going to need to summon multiple copies to unbind her or use a lot of Sunlight Stones, and if you want to run a full Crisis team, that's going to require more copies or other characters using other types of dragons. And Crisis characters, I found, are just hard to use in co-op because you run into things like healers. Like, I love playing Valentine's Addis in High Jupiter's Trial. I think he feels super awesome to play with the Agito weapon. He has an attack rate buff at low HP, and the Agito gives him another attack rate buff. And he just fires these nukes on his S1 where he's doing like 300,000 damage or something like that at low HP. Unfortunately, you go into a public lobby and who shows up? A Heinwald, a Cleo. somebody that's gonna heal him, and there's no sticker to tell them I don't want healing. Go, please stop, don't heal me. So on one hand, the chain co-ability change and co-op change makes it easier to bring those characters to co-op and have them meet the HP checks. On the other hand, they're just still hard to play in co-op because people try to heal you and do other things. So yeah, I don't know. Those characters are very cool in their design, but it's expensive to build a solo team around them, I think, with dragons like Andromeda being probably some of the most effective and needing Wyrmprints that don't rely on HP conditions multiple times for all those units. So, cool banner. I'm unsure that I'm going to pull on it. I do like it. I love that style of play, but it's just hard to make work. Let's look at the Part 2 banner since that just came out, and finally we'll get to this month in Dragalia Lost at the very end. We've talked about a lot of it as well, so we've already alluded to much that's going to be announced. This also lasts until the 13th, and this one has Grace. Grace has kind of a dark storyline. Grief is my punishment for the crimes I committed with the Syndicate. A widow in constant mourning for a deceased husband who hopes to join him by having her life taken by his murderer. To her, ongoing grief is love, so as her love endures, she will never change out of her mourning dress. Pretty dark, pretty morbid. Her skills, she's a healer. Her skills are Sorrow's Requiem. If the user's HP is below 40% of max when using this skill, increases the entire team's defense by 30% for 15 seconds. If the user's HP is equal to or above 40% of max, reduces her HP to 30% of max, and grants the entire team a life shield that nullifies damage relative to the amount of HP lost by the user when using this skill. This shield can stack with ordinary shields. So that is a really huge effect. It's so far the only effect that allows characters like Veronica, or to some extent Cassandra, although she has a counter, but allow them to organically fall to a crisis HP range. That's what makes this so potent, is that this applies to the whole team. So yeah, oh no, wait, am I reading this wrong? If her HP is above or equal to 40% of max, reduces their HP to 30%, so it only reduces hers. But it gives the whole team a shield. The shield is relative to the size of her HP. Alright, so this isn't quite as good as I had hoped. It doesn't enable you to bring your teammates down to low HP. It only gives them shields based on how much HP she loses, and it lets her bring herself down to low HP. So this is not quite as good as I thought it was. It still could be a very large shield depending on the amount of her HP, and she's also going to be able to buff the team's defense, and as we'll see, that is a key part of her kit, and a way for her to get herself back up past the 40% threshold so that she can continuously apply life shields to the entire team. Her second skill, Earnest Prayer, increases the entire team's defense by a whopping 100% for 5 seconds. Hopefully this has a relatively quick cooldown. Otherwise, you're going to have to play pretty conservatively with this, I think, and save it for those moments in the fight of unavoidable damage that you can anticipate are happening. Once you've played a fight enough, you kind of know when those things happen and the extent to which they can be avoided. This is also an incredible defensive buff for any High Dragon Trial entry barrier. If you run her with the Chocolatiers, you could make some magic happen with this for sure. So I think that's a pretty cool application. Her co-ability is unique, 4 strike damage plus 20%. I don't know how to feel about this co-ability. A lot of characters rely on 4 strikes, but I'm honestly not sure how much 20%, how good that is compared to an on-element chain co-ability and co-ability combination. I don't know how easily this will be to slot in. Easy to slot in for different characters. Some characters who rely heavily on 4 strikes, like the Monster Hunter characters, I could see this easily being one of their best co-abilities. But one of the questions I have about this is, and this is kind of getting into the weeds here, Co-abilities are special in how they apply to the damage formula in a lot of cases. Like the strength co-ability of 10%, it doesn't add with strength buffs that you're getting in combat or the strength aura ability effect that you get from your dragon. It is a flat 10% damage output increase, basically, that multiplies times everything else. This Force Strike plus 20%, I wonder if this is going to be additive with your other Force Strike damage effects that you have, or multiplicative, or how this is going to work. I say that because 20%, it's not really a lot. You know, Force Strikes have a cap of 50% off of Worm Prints, and you have characters who regularly have 40 to 50% Force Strike damage in their kit, like Xander or Leia. So it doesn't seem like that big of a co-ability to me, but that being said, when you're a character who just rolls and does Force Strikes, like, that probably is going to matter to your overall damage output a lot. So I wonder, you know, when you have things like the critical rate, strength co-abilities, and even skill damage, but really a lot of these Force Strike centric characters don't care as much about skill damage, so I could see that the argument being in favor of Force Strike on that. I don't know. I really don't know where this is going to fit in, if this is going to be one of the best co-abilities for any sword, for instance, or like any bow. But for specialized characters, I could very easily see this being relevant for them. And right now it's the only source. But as you can see, the chain co-ability is only going to apply to shadow units. One of the things with chain co-ability we didn't discuss earlier was how they implemented this is only the original 5 story characters have non-element locked chain co-abilities. So that's Yuden, Elisan, Ronzel, Luca, and Cleo. They have neutral chain co-abilities that anyone can use. All the other characters in the game right now have them locked to their same element. So this only works on shadow units, and I can't off the top of my head think of a shadow character who just loves to Force Strike a lot. So you would be likely sacrificing this chain co-ability slot if you want to go with this regular co-ability, which does happen, you know, that's very reasonable. A lot of times it's better to just bring a blade than try jump through hoops for the chain co-ability. So that's not to say that that never happens. That is a very normal thing. Or like a buffer probably wants Tobias on the team because of buff time as a co-ability. So one nuance of the system that I didn't discuss before is that her chain co-ability, though, is also special. This is similar to the chain co-ability that Chelsea has for the flame element. It's going to grant a 1-use shield that nullifies damage less than 50% of a teammate's max HP when their HP drops to 40%. Pretty solid shield. I mean, with these enmity characters or crisis characters, they're going to be dropping their HP to a low amount. And for Belina, Valentine's, Addis, and Natalie, they have ways in their kit to do that. She has a way within her kit to do that. So while Veronica and, say, Cassandra aren't exactly in the same boat, you know, for those 4 characters, that's already enough to build an entire team around them dropping their own HP to a low amount, which might be the way to go, since it turns out her Sorrow's Requiem doesn't help her lower the HP of her teammates, just gives them a shield or gives them a defensive buff. Her abilities are Mournful Heart 2, grants her a unique Force Strike, so this kind of fits with her co-ability, and increases Force Strike damage by 30%. This Force Strike dispels 1 buff from an enemy and restores 10% of the damage inflicted as HP to the user. This recovery caps at 5% of their max HP. So this is very, very interesting. Staves have a very linear Force Strike. Obviously, it's just a line. You know, it hits 4 times. That's kind of novel. It can matter for things like the Force Charge effect on Sisters Stay Out or Castle Cheer Corps. You know, you will utilize all 3 Force Charges at once, unless you roll very carefully so you only land 1 or 2 of your Force Strike blows in your Force Strike. So I do wonder what her Force Strike is going to look like, how easy it is to target, how quick it is to spam. All of those things will matter for her, how much SP it generates. It could be that it just works out to where maybe she just wants to roll in 4-strike, and that ends up being pretty good for her. It gives her enough SP generation on her skills that you can just do that. The other possibility, though, is because you recover some of your HP and this dispels the enemy buffs. Maybe you just want to save this for dispelling. You can use it on command, which is excellent. It means that you'll never be trapped in a situation where against Kaiyan you're not able to generate SP and you don't have a dispel active on your team. She'll always be able to dispel no matter what skill she's used, what icons she has available. So that's good. And maybe you just want to use this for the recovery when you want to swap your Sorrow's Requiem from providing the defensive buff to providing the life shield. So I could see it being used in that way as well. She has blindness res of 100% just like Belina, and then healing double buff of 4, which grants her an HP regen buff for 20 seconds each time a defense up buff is received. So that has a lot of synergy. Both of her skills can provide a defense buff, so she can trigger her healing double buff often. And again, this is another mechanism for her to go from below 40% HP to above, and maybe far above if you want to provide a larger life shield. So really, really interesting character. I'm kind of sad that I probably will not be summoning for her, at least not right now. The thing that's upsetting about this banner is, just like with the Mitsuba banner, this is a part 2 banner. They don't even include the featured 5-star dragon Andromeda, who works great with these enmity or crisis characters. And it's just disappointing to see. I mean, it's definitely a monetization move, and I feel like chain code abilities are in that space as well. But I just can't justify it. It's in the permanent pool. Shadow is 2 stacked as an element already. It's just hard to justify, and especially after going so hard for Mitsuba, I can't do it again. I mean, it's not going to happen for me, and that probably means I'm not going to summon on either of the banners, and I'm just going to save, and maybe one day I'll get them. Right now, that's kind of my strategy. You can see the Wormite looking pretty decent, so you can have that as a clue for how the summoning for Gala Alex went. I won't get into that, as I've said many times so far in this video. But finally, we're going to actually get into the proper this month in Dragalia Lost. So here we go, y'all. I hope that you enjoy longer videos, as today's is definitely the longest I've done in a while, but it's just a lot of things I've wanted to converse about for some time. I just haven't had a moment to really collect all my thoughts on Dragalia with everything else going on in the world. So it's good to be back in the game and get to make a video like this. So thanks if you're still here at this point. Let's talk about this month in Dragalia Lost. Hello there, Yuji Okada here, director of Dragalia Lost. Thank you so much for playing Dragalia Lost. Thanks to all of your support, the game has reached its 1.5-year anniversary. There are a lot of events to celebrate the occasion, so be sure to check them out. I talked a little about what's coming during the recent Dragalia Digest, but I'd like to unpack that information a little more in this notification. Plans for this month: are you enjoying the Scars of the Syndicate raid event? The song that plays during the battle against the new raid boss, Aspidocilone, is Get Up by Mad Kid. It also plays when things get heated during the story, so I hope you give it a listen. This is the funniest line on here, I think, is, acknowledging that you're not going to really hear it during the raid because the battles just end too quickly. So just go to the story, listen to it then. That's probably your best chance to listen to this music. It is sweet. I think they upload it as its own track, so if you want to listen to it separately. Aldred and Belina. These two adventurers can't shapeshift, but they can enter a special state called Dragon Drive instead. While in Dragon Drive, certain parameters and skills will be boosted. Also, unlike shapeshifting, you can end Dragon Drive whenever you like without using up the special gauge entirely. I think you'll enjoy how the gameplay feels a little different without shapeshifting. One thing I have to give huge props for on Aldred and Belina, and this is the issue I took with Gala Alex. Gala Alex skill reservoir, it's never explained. If you just have it in your collection, you have to go find that news post, right? At least Dragon Gauge, it takes an ability slot, and it's actually explained on the ability slot. I respect that. I think that that's fair. The Gala Alex unnamed mechanics, the Valeria and Mitsuba, just like all these stances, it's just out of control. It's just out of control to me. So I feel like at least it's explained. I do like them playing in this space. Don't get me wrong. I mentioned the design space thing earlier. Like, I do think it's cool, and it's a way to get people to summon that's not necessarily centered on power, to have new play styles and new characters who feel so different to play than others. Like, I think the Hunter characters felt really different to play, and that was a big win for me. But just when you get too crazy with it, like Gull Alex, I'm just like, okay, you've lost me here. Just give her an ability that says something about skill reservoir. Again, it's probably a nitpick, but Grace was first previewed here before this actually came out, and we got our full banner details. But it says that she's a unique adventurer and that she's a healer who lacks recovery skills, but she's extremely powerful when partnered with adventurers like Natalie. Shout out to Natalie. Hopefully she'll get a mana spiral soon, whose parameters are increased when their HP is lower. We'll revive the Hunt for Harmony facility event in mid-April. I mentioned this earlier in the video. I'm surprised it's getting a revival and not going into the compendium. I would expect it to just show up in the compendium and not have a proper revival, but maybe when they say revive, that's what they actually mean. Maybe it'll just get a blowout so that it has more visibility and eventually sink into the compendium. I don't know. They'll also revive the Fire Emblem Lost Heroes event starting April 19th. I'm sure that's going to be a great time to jump in. Fire Emblem Heroes has had a lot of really positive changes lately, like a sparking system where you're guaranteed to get certain units. So hopefully that game is doing as well as it can. Maybe there will be some crossover of people coming back into Dragalia Lost, which I think would be good to have some new lifeblood in the game. It's a good time to get into Dragalia. You can replay old events more easily. There's lots of freebies. So it is a good time to jump in. And Summon Showcase featuring Marth, Fjorm, and Veronica will also be available at the same time as the revival, of course. Thankfully, I don't have to worry about that showcase because I was able to pull those last year. A Chimera boss, enemy of a new element, and new Chimera weapons will be added during the Fire Emblem Lost Heroes event revival. So being kind of cagey, being kind of coy here, they could just tell us, they could tell us what element it is so we can start preparing in that element for possible Agito trial. But instead, they don't mention it. They just tease that it's a new element. So this means technically that this Chimera could be a light Chimera. It could be a wind Chimera or a water Chimera. Am I right? Yeah, water Chimera. But as we'll see, one of those seems less likely than the others. A brand new Fire Emblem Heroes event will start at the end of April. This has me a bit hyped. I have to be honest, watching the digest, I was kind of disappointed because the fact that they showed no assets, no splash art, nothing about the second event, it made me feel like it was going to be kind of like a generic or bad event, or maybe like a Mega Man level event, like just a few story snippets, no actual gameplay content that was new, just because the production value that they showed. And perhaps it's more so that they're just keeping it under wraps. And I hope that's the case and that we have something really exciting with this event that will likely happen like last day of April going into May. We're going to see something very exciting about it in just a moment that I'm hyped for. So Fire Emblem Heroes events, as announced during the Dragalia Digest, we'll be reviving the Fire Emblem Lost Heroes event starting April 19th. Along with the event revival, we'll also be unlocking the Mana Spiral for Alphonse, Marth, Fjorm, and Veronica. The event has been changed slightly for the revival, so you'll have the chance to view the full story before the start of the new event. The defensive battles have also been adjusted to be playable in solo play. Yes, that is good. What's more, the new Fire Emblem Heroes event will feature new adventurers, story, and gameplay elements. You can also add Sharina, a new adventurer, to your roster by playing. That is hype. I honestly thought, seeing what little they showed for the second part of the event, I had a bad feeling. I thought, we might not get any new adventures. We might not get a banner for this. This looks kind of bare bones, but we're going to get Sharina, and we'll see her in just a moment. This event is scheduled to start at the end of April, so keep an eye out for it. And look how good Sharina looks. She looks really good. She looks really, really good. My favorite character from Fire Emblem Heroes, my favorite OG character. I do like Anna, of course, as the commander of the Asker forces, but Sharina is just so funny and so endearing. Compared to Alphonse, she's a great foil. So I'm really happy. That was the character I wanted last year. I already built a Light Lance. I hope that ends up being her weapon type because I am hyped to add her to my collection. And hopefully this is a bit of a stretch, but if they're going to give Alphonse a spiral, you got to give your girl Sharina a spiral. Don't make us wait another year to get a spiral for Sharina. So I hope that they treat it that way, because I just don't know. You know, we don't know what's going to happen a year from now at this point. There's a lot of uncertainty, and having that spiral would be a nice touch. Chain co-abilities. We added a new feature called Chain Co-abilities in a recent update. The reason we introduced this feature is because we wanted to increase the amount of strategy that goes into your team building. I respect that. I think that's true. I have thought more about that, and like I said, for about a week, I found it very fascinating to theorycraft around it. The only downside is that there's not really content hard enough where you have to care or put in that thought, but maybe that's okay, because for some players, they can do that optimization if it's fun for them and lets them check out new synergies, and for others, they don't have to worry about it. The reason we introduced the strategy is because they want to increase the amount of strategy, but then the number of adventures that can be obtained by playing through the main campaign, events, and summon showcases has grown since the release of the game, and we want to make it worthwhile to upgrade and use all of those adventurers. I also respect that a lot of these characters that got really good chain co-abilities were just sitting on the sidelines. Like, Serena is an example of a very lovely character, very adorable. That should have been reason enough to promote her and use her, but now she has a pretty cool chain ability that relates to hits equals critical rate. So it has cast some spotlight on lesser used characters. Silas is another example, has the poison equals user strength ability as his chain, which is pretty solid. So I think that has been a positive change of this. Unfortunately, when characters were already bad, got a bad chain, it does just kind of sink my heart a little bit, because it's like, man, there's no hope for these characters. You know, even if they get a spiral, they're saddled with this bad chain. But I guess take it for what it's worth. You know, the chain co-ability system didn't have to exist at all, so maybe as critical as I can be of it, maybe it's ultimately not a bad thing. Chain co-abilities are upgraded along with co-abilities, so while upgrading adventurers may be difficult, these parameters boost adventurers plenty even at level 1. I hope you'll try lots of different combinations. Because of the introduction of chain co-abilities, we'd also like to increase the number of teams you can build in a future update, so please wait a while longer while we work on this. That is a huge one. The thing about chain co-abilities, I feel like ultimately it is a revenue move. It's not necessarily a move that makes the game easier. It does make the team building more strategic and more thoughtful, but it is something that can be solved by simulation as well. So I don't know how far along the simulators are right now. I think that the Shinobu simulator, Wild Shinobu, where you can have a custom sim, has all of the chain co-abilities, or at least most of them, and so you can compare and contrast your simulator DPS depending on your 4 chain team members. And so in some sense it adds some strategic complexity, and there are things that sims don't capture super well, but you can kind of solve it as well. Like, you can pick the 4 optimal teammates that result in the maximum DPS. It's just kind of like more variables into your optimization problem that you can toggle, because now you have 2 imprints, you have your weapon, your dragon, and your 3 teammates to whatever adventurer's DPS you're trying to maximize. Now, it is more interesting to think about maximizing a team DPS. That's a little bit harder of a problem, because it's that many more variables you're changing out. Even your primary adventure is getting changed in and out. So that question is still probably hard enough that it's not easy to just pick the best answer. But for co-op, where you only care about how your chains and co-abilities affect your lead unit, it's pretty straightforward to use that sim. And if you're not familiar with it, I'll definitely link to it in the description below. So future updates, a new feature for skills. We're planning on adding a new feature that allows adventurers to use the skills of other adventurers as long as that adventurer meets certain conditions. This will make it possible to combine skills in brand new ways, so we expect that it will create quite a bit of variance in quest strategy and how adventures are used. We'll be sure to share more information about the feature in a future update notification. I'm still hyped about this feature. It could be very broken. There's probably got to be some limits to it. I think the examples I gave in my digest reaction were not actually that broken after seeing what some other people came up with. Like, I was thinking this could be a way to bring along a stun effect or a sleep effect or something like that to cheese certain parts of the boss fights. But then when you think about it, because you're borrowing a skill from an adventurer on your team, it's kind of redundant because, like, let's say I want to borrow Hawk's ability, or Linya's a better example because her first skill causes sleep without requiring any Force Strike shenanigans or anything special. So let's say I want to use Linya's ability and borrow it. Well, that means Linya's in a team slot, so she already has her skill that can cause sleep. So it isn't actually that good with afflictions, I don't think, or like those crowd control type afflictions, because it's a redundancy. You already have that character somewhere on your team if you're borrowing their ability, or skill rather, from what I can tell. So there are other synergies though where it could be super good. I'm excited about it. It's scary. It's another thing that could obsolete characters potentially, but at the same time, just like with chain co-abilities, it's a way of getting these lesser used characters into a team because somehow the ability of your lead unit to spam or use their skill could do some degenerate or cool thing. So I'm pleased with that. I think that'll be a cool change. Events. We're also preparing new events in addition to raid events and facility events. They teased this. In the first event format, so there's 2 formats, that's huge, you'll have to take on large amounts of enemies. The other format will center on defensive battles, like in the Fire Emblem Lost Heroes event. In this event, you'll be able to play battles with vast maps, reinforcements, and ever-changing battle situations. Yes, praise. It doesn't even have to be that hard. It's okay. If it's easy, it's okay. At least make it so we 2-shot these enemies. That's my only hope. Because if you just 1-shot them, we're not going to get to see those mobs of enemies swarming you down. You know, it felt so cool in the Fire Emblem Lost Heroes event where you're surrounded by like 30 guys and trying to protect your base. But that is probably the thing that makes me the happiest. It was very nebulous in the digest, and it made me worried that this was like a December thing. And maybe it is. You know, maybe it's still farther out, but the fact that there's 2 formats and they'll hold one of the 2 each month and each will have a new story, that's awesome. That is absolutely awesome to me. Like, raids are okay. The difficulty hasn't scaled that much since Fractured Futures, and they're kind of getting stagnant. They kind of feel more like a weekend activity, honestly, to where I wouldn't mind if like Omega raids, or rather Astral raids, just kind of become the way raids are recycled and treated. And perhaps on those weekends where they're around, they bring the story content back as well or something, or bring the treasure trade. Because honestly, raids have kind of gotten boring. So new event types, sign me up. And facility events, they're the original wave-based content. They're still hard to some extent, but it's always the same objective. The defensive battle is a very different feeling objective because you have enemies coming at you from different paths. You have to be able to defend all the different paths that you're working with. It just feels different than just constantly having to wipe up the waves of enemies. So when they say that this first type of event is going to be taking on a large amount of enemies, I'm imagining, as always, our Kaleido dungeon, right? Where you're going down layer after layer. Each one has additional enemies. That is already kind of like what facility events are in a way, because each wave spawns in a special pattern that presents some interesting challenges, throws some interesting hitboxes onto you, and depending on the difficulty of these, if you have tier 2 high dragon weapons, Agito weapons, it might not really matter. It might not be that much content, but just the fact that it's new, I have hope. I have hope around this. That's probably the biggest thing I'm excited about right now. The Agito Uprising. So we're planning on adding a new boss to the Agito Uprising at the end of April. One of the 2 bosses shown during the Dragalia Digest will make their debut. And we have, of course, this first boss, I think is Ciela. And I think this is Otoha and Ayaha. I'm not sure, honestly. Yeah, they didn't re-say it here, surprisingly. But, again, being kind of coy, being kind of cagey about which one will likely come first. They showed the water one first. I feel like that's maybe to throw us off. I feel like maybe we're going to get the twins first. And that would be flame, meaning we'd want water team. So wind has gotten more spirals recently, which would make you think a water boss would come. I feel like maybe they're going to do the flame boss to throw us off, because side games do be like that sometimes. Yeah, I don't know, but this is a good time to be playing High Midgard Stormer's Trial to craft Tier 2 High Dragon weapons in Wind, or High Mercury's Trial to craft Tier 2 High Dragon weapons in Water. And probably once we see the Chimera, we'll know. But that could be another way that they trick us, so to speak, because Cygames likes to be a little cheeky with this stuff, sometimes, about the order in which things release. Maybe they'll give us a Chimera, and then, it's actually a different Agito boss, and that satiates some of the people who were saying that Kayan was too easy because you could just get the Chimera weapon and very easily beat it. Maybe this one will be a step up in difficulty, and we'll talk about difficulty in just a minute. So crafting, they're going to improve the look and navigation of the crafting pages. That is pretty huge. If the improvements they make end up meaning that we spent extra materials, they're going to compensate. That is also super generous. If that affects Agito or High Dragon weapons, it's going to be very nice to have those materials back. And honestly, something like the Dismantle, I don't really see what's so wrong with it being on the stronger weapons. Yes, because rupees are so available now, it means you could change out and use a weapon at your will, essentially, for any type of weapon. But frankly, that's kind of fun. Getting to try different characters without having to grind that much is kind of fun. So I don't necessarily see that being a bad thing. And maybe if the Tier 2 Agito weapons require a lot of materials, I would even consider dismantling the variety of Tier 1 weapons I had crafted, if possible, to save up those materials toward a Tier 2. But game difficulty is the final point that they discuss here, and other than the, in conclusion, 100 Fafnir metal and 145 crystals. And this is a pretty big topic of conversation in the community, so let's read through this and then I'll give my thoughts. And this will be the last thing for this video, so thank you for sticking around so long. With the game having reached its 1.5-year anniversary, I'd like to talk a little about the direction of the game going forward. Dragalia Lost is an action RPG. Players are required to combine the RPG element of building up adventures with the action element of moving around during battle to overcome powerful foes. Right now, we feel that there's a significant gap between players in regards to the action elements of the game. We want to make it so that a wide variety of people can play the game, and those who like upgrading adventurers and straightforward gameplay, but are not as interested in the action, to those who prefer the action and working out ways to take on boss enemies. Of the two, we are currently prioritizing adding and adjusting content to help players who are not as interested in action enjoy the game. I think the barrier to entry for Dragalia Lost is a little high for a smartphone game, and that's making matching during co-op difficult and causing some players to quit playing the game entirely. With the addition of chain co-abilities and the new skill feature, it will be possible to upgrade teams further than ever before and make it possible for players who are less interested in the action elements of the game to potentially clear high difficulty quests. This is the reason why we've kept the difficulty of the Agito Uprising down in terms of the action elements for standard and expert difficulties. And then this month in Dragalia Lost notification that was released back in March of this year, I said that the Agito Uprising is easier to tackle than Advanced Dragon Trials because I think that clearing the Agito Uprising on standard difficulty and crafting a 6-star weapon before challenging Advanced Dragon Trials is one possible option, but it seems my lack of explanation generated some confusion, so I apologize for that. In regard to the Agito Uprising, we're planning to add difficulty levels in the future. When we do, we will make it possible to craft Tier 2 6-star weapons. Additionally, in the future, we are hoping to add quests that are a little more difficult to those who are seeking a challenge, though you won't be able to collect any rewards or materials for increasing your might from them. I apologize to users who are waiting for quests of a more challenging difficulty level who felt that these quests were lacking. I hope you're looking forward to these future quests and additions to the Agito Uprising. Due to development circumstances, there are a lot of problems we cannot resolve immediately, but we will continue to make improvements to the game so it better lives up to your expectations. I am really pleased with this message. It's a very long segment of this month in Dragalia Lost, but it's very candid. I feel like it's very honest about how they're approaching difficulty in the game, and I'm happy with how it was treated. There's two sides of the coin with this. There are times when I feel like it's too easy. I'm just auto-battling. There's not content. Why isn't it challenging? I can't enjoy the raid because it ends so quickly, right? And the other side is time attack. Last year, all the expert high dragons coming out at once, master coming out every week, where it felt like you had to do so much to keep up with the content, and it was too difficult. The barrier to entry was so high, and the drops were still randomized. There was no revive feature, that it just sort of became frustrating and not enjoyable to play, especially in the situation of random matchmaking and co-op. One of the things that I like these days is that I play High Dragon Trials solo. I don't have to subject myself to a lobby if I don't want to. If I feel like doing the High Dragon Trial solo, for the most part, the teams are powerful enough at this point that that is a possibility. So there's sort of these two competing forces for the future of Dragalia Lost, and I like the idea that there will be hard content that if players want that fulfillment and that challenge, it is an option. Perhaps there'll be some glamour or some cosmetics, maybe some epithets behind it, but not any type of reward that is going to improve your competitiveness in a public lobby, in a group. Because as much as this is a co-op game, it can be tough when, by playing so much and being on the frontier of content, you get so much further ahead of others in terms of your might and power level that those players tend to group together in public lobbies, set might gates, etc. And the people who are trying to come in very often don't end up in a room with those more capable players. So I feel like the fact that they've addressed this as openly as they have, I can't really complain about it. I think that at times I've wanted harder content, at other times I've wanted easier content. So I've gone back and forth on this a lot, and I see their position. Like, this is not an easy thing to balance. The harder you make things, I do think you push away a lot of people. And especially when it's content or difficulty that doesn't respect their time. If you fail a public lobby before the revive mechanic, you have to find a new group potentially, or you have to wait to see who sticks with your same group, and then there's all sorts of communication issues that can happen in these High Dragon Trials. That's kind of where we were in the time attack world last year, and with the release of Master, that made it so frustrating for so many players. It was a lot slower to grind out weapons, the augments were not as widely available, so you had to keep resetting. Nowadays, you can have augments available on Wyrmprints to fully kit out 4 teams with Wyrmprints and dragons, and not dragons with augments, but there's been enough sunlight stones and things like that. Just the amount of free stuff over time has made it a lot easier if you've stayed on that frontier to get to a point where those fights are very comfortable. And if you're newer to the game, I think that there's more catch-up mechanics in place to where you can get to that point more quickly. So I feel pretty comfortable and pretty happy with how they handled the game difficulty conversation here. It's not really a stressor to me. I don't think I've ever felt like I'm going to quit Dragalia because it's too easy. If anything, I felt like I'm going to quit Dragalia because it's too demanding and too hard. So I think that they've made a wise choice in the types of players they want to try appease. That said, the hardcore players do probably spend more. There's probably some reason behind wanting to keep them satisfied. And hopefully if you're in that camp, the new content that they've suggested is coming, and the Master Agito trials that are kind of implied here satiate and fulfill your needs with the game. Other than that, I still think, despite reading all of that, I still think they could surprise us here and maybe give us the opposite chimera to the boss that we fight, to try make this Agito fight that's coming up be a little bit of a bump relative to Kayan. I think that they just kind of do things like that. So in the past, we've never been able to predict the elemental cycle of events, that type of thing from side games. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, and then in a later month, that particular Agito trial becomes easier. Now that there's at least 2, Volk and Kayan, now this third one, maybe they'll feel that there's enough content that they can kind of make it a little spicier, especially on the expert compared to the standard difficulty. So we'll see. I don't have as many concerns about balancing the difficulty of the game, except that, yes, the team building for things like chain co-abilities does feel a little irrelevant when content is sort of so easy to clear. But that being said, we've already been in this video for so long, y'all. Thank you for watching. We are done today. We talked about a lot. I had a lot of fun doing it. I hope you did as well. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you next time.